Hey guys, happy Friday. Today's math lesson, we are actually skipping lesson 97 and 98 and moving on to lesson 99, which is on page 513 of your book. And today's topic is actually a lot of review because we are just covering how to change fractions to decimals, fractions to percents, decimals to fractions, decimals to percents, and then percents to decimals and percents to fractions. Which you have learned how to do every single one of these. So it's just review, and the only thing that is going to look a little different is that it's represented on a chart rather than like separate answers, which I will show you here in just a second. So like I said, equivalent just means equal. So you are just translating fractions, decimals, and percents all to make the same answer, which is what we've been doing. So review, let's talk about fractions first. So this is just putting it very simply, but a fraction to a decimal. The top number is going to be your dividend, and the bottom number is going to be your divisor. So you do 1 divided by 2. Now we obviously know that 2 cannot go into 1. So that's when you add your decimal and a 0. So then 2 can go into 10 5 times. And then your decimal just moves up. So then you're left with no remainder. So we've taken a fraction and put it into a decimal. And you're done. Now a fraction to a percent. This is the easiest way, I think, to do this, and this is the way that I just taught you a few lessons ago. So you multiply the fraction by 100% over 1. So 1 times 100% is 100. 2 times 1 is 2. And then you would divide 100% by 2 to get your 50%. And again, that way doesn't require you to worry about any decimals or moving them. So in my opinion, this is the easiest way to do that. So we took a fraction and put it into a percent. And you're finished with that one. Next is decimal into a fraction. So if I have this decimal, I notice that the last number behind the decimal is in the tenths spot. So that means that my denominator is going to be 10. So I'm going to put the 5 over 10 because it's in the tenths place. And then I take that fraction and reduce it down when I can. So I took a decimal and put it into a fraction. The other way, decimal into percent. So I have a decimal here. And this actually does not require you to do any math. All that it requires you to do is move the decimal over 2 places to the right. You don't have to think about it. So your decimal is here, and you're going to move it 2 times over to the right. So you're going to put a 0 in that open spot there, and you can get rid of this 1 up here. You don't need it. And then you get rid of your decimal, of course, because you don't need it. And you just add a little percent sign. So we took a decimal and changed it to a percent. Now the last way is taking percents and translating them to something different. So you have 50% here, and this I taught you a long time ago. All percents go over 100. And then you reduce that fraction down as you can. So I went ahead and crossed out these zeros here to get rid of those. So then I had 5 tenths, and then I reduced that down to 1/2. So 50% into a 1/2 fraction. And then last but not least is a percent into a decimal. So I have 50%, and again, this does not require any math as well. So I don't already have a decimal right there in the percent, so I'm actually going to add it to the back of the number, so behind the 0, and I'm going to move that over 2 times to the left instead. So my decimal now is in front of the 5 rather than behind a 0. So then I can get rid of that 0 at the back. I don't need it. And just to be proper, I'm going to put a 0 in front of that decimal, and I have 0.5 now. So I took a percent and changed it into a decimal. Now, if you're having trouble with any of these, all of these can be looked up in your math book. Just use your table of contents. Also, don't hesitate to go back through your notes if you're having trouble with this, but I tried to make this short and sweet for you. So now that we've reviewed how to do these things, this is what your math homework is going to look like. So you're going to have a chart similar to this, and what it wants you to do is, if it gives you a fraction, it wants you to change it into a decimal and a percent. If it gives you a decimal, then it wants you to put it into a fraction and a percent. And if it gives you a percent, it wants you to change that into a fraction and a decimal. So let's just do this together, and then I will turn you loose to start on your homework. So 1/2, okay, again, the way I'm going to do that, and I'll just show my work down here so you can see it. So again, I'm going to divide 1 by 2, and I know that 2 does not go into 1, so I have to add a decimal and a 0. But 2 goes into 10 5 times. And I wouldn't have a remainder, of course. So then my answer for A is 0.5. So I can just fill that in. Then I need to change 1/2 to a percent. So I'm going to put that over here so I can show my work. So 1/2 times 100% over 1. So I have 1 times 100%, which of course is 100%. And then I have 2 times 1, which is 2. And then I'm going to divide that 100% by 2. So 2 cannot go into 1, but 2 can go into 10 5 times. Of course, I don't have a remainder, but I have to pull down that last 0. So 2 can go into 0 0 times. And that's my answer for letter B, is 50%. Okay, and next I'm taking 0.3 and changing that into a fraction. So I will show my work down here. So the 3 is in the tenths place. So that means that my denominator is going to be 10. And I actually cannot reduce that down anymore. So my answer is just 3/10 for letter C. Now I'm going to take that decimal and put it into a percent. And remember, this does not require math. All that it requires is that I move my decimal over 2 times to the right. 1, 2. I'm going to put a 0 in that open spot. And I don't need a 0 up front there. And that decimal eventually just kind of vanishes. So I just need to put a percent sign behind 30. And that's my answer for letter D. And if I'm going too fast, don't hesitate to pause these videos while you catch up. Letter E. So I'm taking 40% and changing that into a fraction. So I'm going to put 40% over 100. And then that is going to give me, of course, 40 over 100. But I can cross out some zeros that are on top and bottom. So then 4/10 is going to reduce down to 2/5. And that is my answer for letter E. And then last but not least is letter F. So I'm going to take 40%. And I'm going to change that into a decimal. So this does not require any math either. So because there is no decimal in 40, I'm going to add 1 to the back of that 0 there, and I'm going to move it 2 times to the left. So now my decimal is going to be in front of that 4 rather than behind a 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and write down 0.40, and notice I don't need that percent sign anymore. To be proper, I'm going to go ahead and put a 0 up front, and I'm going to get rid of that 0 at the back. So then my answer is going to be 0.4 for letter F. And that is how you fill in the chart. And that's it for today's lesson. Have a good weekend, everybody.